You guys have been given 20 weeks to imagine a new Africa. 2 weeks gone, 18 weeks to go. In Failure Club, we say the success is what we let ourselves settle for when we're afraid to fail at something that's truly life-defining.
Fear starting a company when you're 18 years old. We had zero funding. We couldn't even get a bank loan. What do you guys call this job? We actually dance with fear every day, seriously.
Today we did an interactive session where we got to interview and kind of do collaborative workshopping, brainstorming with 3 different entrepreneurs here, student entrepreneurs with big ideas, and we were able to come up with some fantastic, ambitious, audacious, inspiring goals.
It was daunting. I felt that I should probably refine my ideas more, think about the details, but my friend nudged me to just go for it. So having to speak up there was really good because I felt that I was being brave and I was stepping out of my comfort zone. Failure is something that you shouldn't be scared of. It's actually something that you need so that you can refine whatever idea that you have or whatever that you want to do.
The key attributes we're looking for are goals that have people wanting to jump in and contribute their own time and effort and resources. And each of the students that were up here, within just a matter of 5 or 7 minutes, were able to formulate a very focalized expression of their idea of a big, ambitious, inspiring goal that had people from the crowd participating. So when I get to see that, when I get to see people jazzed up and motivated to go out and change their community, change their country, change the continent, then it's just reaffirming for me as to why I'm here.
I was at the Upstart yoga today. It was so much fun. It was quite interesting to meditate with noise both outside and inside your head.
I joined a yoga session today. It was very, very nice. First experience of my life. I had tight prints.
It's just fantastic to have an opportunity just to give people a taste of what it's like to just turn towards yourself, to relax a little bit, and to just learn to be with yourself in a different kind of way than the rest of the world usually demands of us.
My Upstart idea is coming along slowly. It's quite complicated, but I'm trying to work it all out. This week has helped me in realizing that you need to set really specific goals and that you need to ask yourself challenging questions. And it's also helped me realize that I really need to stretch myself and go the extra mile and challenge myself to do more than I thought was possible.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Phillip Kiracofe, and I actually have a company called Horizon Ventures, so I'm not a professional at Failure Club. Failure Club is more of a gift that we've started, and I'll tell you the story about it. But I like to refer to myself as a professional failure because that's really the inspiration for my life. So it's a true privilege to be here at the UCT Upstart program. My entire professional life has actually been focused on pursuing the next big idea. So when Gina shared the idea for this program, it was really a perfect fit. Now, as an American and as a venture capitalist, I can be fairly blunt. So I just want to get right into it. You guys have been given 20 weeks to imagine a new Africa. 20 weeks to imagine a new Africa. Thus far, you've heard a couple of inspiring speakers. You've had the cool party. I think last week you were out spraying each other down with yellow paint. 2 weeks gone, 18 weeks to go. So how are you doing in this project? How are you doing on the challenge? Imagining a new Africa, 18 weeks to go. Show of hands, how many of you have even started contemplating what a new Africa would look like? 1, 2. Don't be shy. You're 10% of the way through the program, and most of you don't have an idea, or even a hint of an idea yet, of what you could possibly achieve in 20 weeks that would change the continent. So sit with that for a minute. Reflect on that. What kind of feelings are coming up now? 10% of the way through your program, what can you possibly accomplish? How many of you guys are feeling inspired? tentative, terrified, ambivalent, nothing, okay. That's a good place to be, actually. Change the continent in 20 weeks, that's a pretty daunting challenge. You probably recognize from my accent that I'm American. We like these big failure type things, so I have an equally daunting challenge with you today. My challenge today is to, in less than 20 minutes, try to unwind about 20 years worth of societal conditioning. We, as a species, have built-in protection mechanisms against mortal threats. But as a society, we've actually been brainwashed to relate to failure and the fear of failure in the same physiological reactions as if it were a mortal predator. So how many of you guys love the idea of failure? Show of hands. The other speaker. I'm sure you're going to hear shortly why that is. But if I invited you today to join something called the Failure Club, how many takers would I have? How many people here would at least be like moderately curious? Okay, a few more. So my goal here today is to transform that, and by the end to have everybody loving the idea of failure. In 2004, we started a club with a group of friends of mine to test out this radical idea. The goal was, how could we replace all the negative associations that people have with failure with something that was fun, inspiring, and ultimately motivating, so that we were pursuing failure all the time. So the group was 7 to 10 people, and each person picks a goal that's so audacious that the probability of failure is nearly certain. So almost 100% chance of failure, but yet still attainable. And we would meet periodically every 2 to 3 weeks in order to kind of pump each other up, talk about the hurdles, talk about the challenges, talk about the things that were getting us down. But ultimately, it was a competition to see who could fail harder, faster, bigger, grander, more epic, right? And as this became the game, that challenge, that camaraderie, that competition amongst actually trumped the fear of failure. And once we started into the fear, the failure challenges, then it became almost routine. And by the end of the year, failure was so much of a non-issue that there really seemed to be nothing that you couldn't take on. And what we realized is that, contrary to popular belief, success is really easy. You can succeed at anything you want, you just have to set the bar low enough, right? But is that truly fulfilling? Is that the dream life that any of us want to be living? In Failure Club, we say the success is what we let ourselves settle for when we're afraid to fail at something that's truly life-defining. Success is comfort, it's justification. It's often disappointing, and it's always short-lived. Failure, on the other hand, can be utterly liberating and incredibly fulfilling if you know how to play the game. My first Failure Club project was to launch a $10 million venture capital fund in a year, and I totally failed. I think by the end of the first year we had about $10,000. But 2 years later we did get it off the ground and ultimately made some pretty impressive investments. But at Failure Club, deadlines are absolutely essential. They're sacrosanct. For you guys, it's 18 weeks. Now, during that time, I also met a director named Morgan Spurlock, and he was so enamored by the concept that he set out to make a reality show. So his Failure Club project was actually to create a documentary show about the club. It took us 6 years to get this thing off the ground, but ultimately in 2012, Yahoo sponsored it, and we had the opportunity to film 7 New Yorkers going through the process of their Failure Club projects. Now, I want to share these with you because these videos are all online, and you can actually go and, if you're so inspired, you can watch what they've gone through. And I think you'll find that the journey is quite familiar. So let me quickly talk about a couple of these goals, and you'll notice that there's a fair diversity in the projects. So first of all, Meg, she wanted to be a stand-up comedian. Unfortunately, she had debilitating stage fright, and quite frankly, she wasn't all that funny. But her goal by the end of the year was to do a stand-up comedy act in front of 200 people, a 20-minute paid set in front of 200 people. Gina was 55 years old, not our Gina. She had fallen off a horse when she was 14 years old, and she hadn't been back on since then. So her goal was to get back on a horse and win a blue ribbon at an equestrian jumping competition by the end of the year. Ignacio was also in his late 50s, and he was running a tiny little fabric stand at a market out somewhere in Brooklyn. But his goal was to challenge the New York fashion industry by launching a capsule collection and opening a men's haberdashery in the heart of the fashion district. Liz took a severance package from a Fortune 500 company to build a handyman business from scratch with a goal of getting 10,000 customers in the first year. So Elizabeth was fanatic about Christmas, and she came in with the goal of being, we'll tell you about Elizabeth. So she's fanatic about Christmas, and her goal is to record a Christmas song that was a top 10 downloads on iTunes. Eric comes in, he works at a comic book club, he's kind of a geeky guy, but he wants to build a motorcycle from scratch and lead a cross-country ride in honor of his father, who had passed away from a heart attack. And finally, Jess wants to create a catering business that has 10,000 jobs in 1 year. So by the end of the year, the first year, we had 3 failures and 4 people who failed to fail. And we use that phrase because failing, if you hit your goal, in our world, that just means that you didn't set your goal high enough. That means you actually underestimated your capacity. So if you guys get to the end of your 18 weeks and you've accomplished your project, then we're going to say aim higher next year. But I want to share with you a couple of the highlights. So Meg, who was the comedian, halfway through the year, so about 20 weeks in, she went on stage at Amateur Night at the Apollo. Now, for those of you that don't know, Amateur Night at the Apollo is one of the most legendary stages in New York and in the US. And it was really the original talent show. So kind of like Idols or something along those lines, but rather than people voting with their SMS or tweets, what they actually do is they vote by booing you off the stage. So if you're not good enough, then you get booed off the stage. So she gets up, she's now a couple months into her challenge. She's got a little bit of material. 2 minutes into her set, and one of her jokes just goes just falls totally flat, total bomb. People start booing, and pretty soon you've got 1,300 people booing at her on the stage all alone. So imagine standing alone like that. Well, she realized, I'm standing on the Apollo, I've got the microphone, I'm not stopping. So she keeps going with her set, and eventually the organizers, who had never seen anything like that, decided they had to just cut her mic and escort her off the stage, at which point she got a standing ovation. Elizabeth, near the end of her year, she realized in order to get her video her song as a top 10 downloads on iTunes, was going to have to move into, she was going to have to do something dramatic. So she films a video in Times Square, which didn't have approval of the city, and sends this thing viral. And on the day that her song launched on iTunes, she beat out Bing Crosby and Justin Bieber. So now these are great stories, but you may be asking, what does this have to do with imagining a new Africa? And the answer is that far more important than specific goals, what we learned was that we could fundamentally rewire how each person looks at the world. Now, all the obstacles that we allow ourselves to be stopped by, time, money, skills, education, are all self-imposed. And when those are stripped away, literally anything is possible. Now, the Failure Club has given me the freedom to take on a bunch of projects. Gina mentioned one of them, summiting Kilimanjaro, but I've also completed Ironman twice. I've ran the Comrades Marathon, I co-hosted a show with Morgan Spurlock, I raised a venture capital fund, and I organized the first ever international mountain bike race in Haiti. Now, the MTBIED race is probably the most relevant here from a standpoint of impact. You guys may remember in 2010 there was an earthquake in Haiti and it killed a couple 100,000 people, wiped out the capital city, and Haiti was already the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but that earthquake obviously put it far down below. So I went there initially as a volunteer to help clear rubble, but what I realized was that they ultimately what they needed was adventure tourism. So I organized a mountain bike race similar to the Cape Epic. And in the first year, we managed to get 26 riders to come, 13 of whom were international from 5 different countries, and we generated $200,000 in tourism revenue. So now how are you guys feeling? Perhaps a bit more inspired? You have some ideas? But let's talk about your projects. How many of you guys have a someday project? One of these things you're like, someday I would like to ... So when you think of the world, when you look around, when you look at your country, your community, or your continent, what kinds of ideas do you have about things that have gone horribly wrong, things that you could have an impact, things that you could tackle, things that you could take on? How many of those things are sitting back in your someday list? Like someday I will ... Quite a few, right? So now imagine if tomorrow, when you turn the calendar, it didn't say Tuesday, but it actually said someday. Imagine what that day would be like, given all those things that are on your list, right? So picking a project shouldn't be that difficult. You've got your whole list already to work with. Now the question is, which one are you going to get off of your someday list? So most important after picking your project is having your support structure. And the UCT Upstarts program is that support structure. So you guys now have an opportunity to take your groups of 2 to 6 and start working on a project together. And what we're going to do on Wednesday when we come back for the workshop is start on a project that is, or start on a process of refining that goal into a specific, measurable, targeted goal where you have 18 weeks to accomplish. And one of the keys is that the probability of success goes up as the rate of failure goes up. So one of the most inspiring speakers, of course, when it comes to failure is our own Nelson Mandela. So thank you very much, and I will see you guys on Wednesday to do a proper workshop on failure. In the interim, happy failure.